A significant weather pattern is developing across the United Kingdom. And if you've been following the models this week, you'll know there has been considerable debate about what happens towards the end of January. Let me walk you through what we are seeing. Right now, conditions across the country are remarkably varied. The Scottish Highlands have been dealing with bitterly cold air, temperatures dropping to -5 this morning. Meanwhile, across the southwest, from Cornwall through to Somerset, it's been mild and damp, temperatures running 5 to 8 degrees above average. That contrast is about to become even more pronounced. The immediate forecast for today shows low cloud, mist, and fog across central and eastern parts. This could be quite stubborn. Takes a while to clear because the low pressure that brought blustery showers through yesterday is filling, becoming less intense. The winds have gone slack, which is why we are seeing that low cloud and murk developing. There are showery bursts of rain around, particularly across western and southwestern parts, mainly around the Irish Sea. Some of these could be quite heavy. Meanwhile, a swathe of showers is pushing northwards across parts of England and Wales into Scotland through the afternoon. Across England and Wales, away from the west and southwest, many of the showers will clear, turning drier with some breaks in the cloud, particularly towards the west. Some sunshine breaking through, eastern areas staying under that cloud, which could be quite stubborn. If you re-stuck under that low cloud, it's going to feel pretty cold. Temperatures generally peaking from around 6 to 7 Celsius in the north to around 9, possibly 10 Celsius towards the south. A fairly damp end to the day across some central eastern parts of Scotland. Could be a bit of sleet and snow over the higher ground, but most of that rain clears through overnight. Apart from a few showers here and there, lots of dry weather for a time. Thick cloud across eastern parts, and that thick cloud could lower to some murkiness. Once more, some mist, some fog. Central eastern parts in particular likely to have difficult driving conditions, poor visibility early on Sunday morning. Further west, clearer skies. But even with these clear skies, we could see a few patches of fog developing and a touch of frost here or there. Later in the night, a bit more rain and even thicker cloud coming in from the southeast. There could be a touch of frost across some western and northwestern parts where we get those clearer skies. Temperatures dropping a few degrees below freezing in some places. For many where we get that thicker cloud continuing, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Sunday starts wet across some central and southeastern parts of England. That rain then slowly makes progress further northwards. It's going to affect everywhere from the West Country up through eastern Wales, up towards northern England, and then later eastern parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, actually a fair amount of fine weather, much of Scotland avoiding the rain, albeit a few showers for western parts. Much of Northern Ireland also staying largely dry, just a few showers perhaps towards the east. Some drier, brighter weather developing across parts of East Anglia and maybe Kent, possibly even towards London later in the afternoon. Where you are under the cloud and the rain, it's going to feel pretty cold. In other places where we get any sunshine breaking through, not too bad considering it is the middle of January. Now, let's talk about what's happening beyond the immediate forecast, because this is where it gets interesting. There's a huge Scandinavian high building in. Initially, it's not going to impact us directly. What it will do is push the jet stream southwards and slow down the movement of low-pressure systems, potentially preventing them from moving eastwards into the North Sea. This could mean some areas might stay dry, but other areas could get quite a pasting as we see slower-moving areas of rain. This big Scandinavian high has been showing up in the model output for much of this week, and it continues to remain there. We are very confident that Scandinavian high will be building through the coming days and potentially nudging more towards us, directly impacting us by the end of next week. Looking at the live radar and the latest model data, we've got a bit of an east-west split. Rain moving in off the Atlantic, slightly drier further eastwards. This is going to be the pattern over the coming days. Rain trying to move in off the Atlantic, but not having much success as it pushes eastwards because we are starting to see that big high-pressure system develop to our northeast. The winds are coming up from the south at the moment, bringing further spells of heavy but fast-moving rain. They are pretty blustery, moving southwards to northwards. Further northwards and eastwards, it's slightly colder with clearer skies. Further southwards with more areas of rain and cloud, temperatures are a bit milder, but they still chilly. Mid to high single digits in those areas, close to freezing further northwards. Over the next few days, the rainfall will continue to move up through the south overnight into Sunday. We will see rain further eastwards, though it might be a little bit drier into next week. Those areas of rain continue spiraling. The low-pressure system really doesn't move much from being positioned right over the Republic of Ireland, and that S, because of that Scandinavian high and that block that is starting to build, weather systems are starting to move in from more of a south to southeasterly direction, showing you the flow is starting to reverse. That rain is heading straight southwards to northwards as we see low pressure coming up against the high pressure to our east. The models actually have low pressure winning out initially. But it doesn't move into the North Sea like we normally expect with a stronger jet stream. It kind of moves in, fizzles away, and clears to our north. Through Tuesday into Wednesday, that rain moves through, fizzles away, and then heads back northwards. These lows approach off the Atlantic, push in, and don't really make much success at all. In the final 24 hours of some model runs, low pressure to our west does not move. Yes, we are going to see rainfall. We are going to stay reasonably unsettled over the coming days. But slowly, that high pressure to our northeast will have more and more influence. By the end of next week, we could be, especially in the east, definitely under the influence more of that higher pressure. Colder, frostier, and foggier. Looking at maximum temperatures, frost in the north tonight, further southwards, mid-single digits. Saturday afternoon, 7 to 8 degrees in the south, average to maybe just above average, colder, further north. Into Sunday, frosts where it is chilly. Sunday afternoon, 6 to 10 degrees. Into Monday, again, frost with clearer skies, cloud and a bit of rain a little bit milder. Afternoon temperatures, again, mid to high single digits. Tuesday, frosts in the west, a little bit colder there. Further eastwards, mid to high single digits, really not deviating too far from average. Some areas slightly cooler, some areas slightly milder, but nothing too unexpected for the time of year. But I'm expecting slowly later on next week, you can start to see colder air just out to our east. Colder lower level air and generally colder upper air just sitting off screen to our east. That will slowly start to push in. It is not very cold initially, but it S cooler, chillier lower dew points as well. That S just the signs for it turning a bit colder towards the end of the month. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about how cold it might get. The GFS model has been fairly bullish over the past few days for very cold conditions. The operational run shows the high pressure really starting to take over Scandinavia over the coming days. It's not in an orientation to pull in bitterly cold easterlies initially. It just halts the jet stream and doesn't really allow much to move in. But come next weekend, around 7 to 8 days' time, we are seeing the potential for bitterly cold easterly winds. Some model runs show heavy snow showers most likely piling in from the North Sea. The high pressure does collapse quite quickly in some scenarios. So yes, it could be cold and snowy for a couple of days, but eventually it would be a drier, colder pattern. Interestingly, that high-pressure system collapses temporarily in some runs, but rebuilds, and we see another spell of easterly winds as we head into the final few days of the month and into early February with another push of cold or even very cold air. We're not tapping into the really bitterly cold beast from the east type air masses yet. Not quite tapping into that at this time frame, but we're getting close. Now, there is considerable uncertainty between model runs in terms of exact details, but easterly winds are showing up in pretty much every run. Given the high-level synoptics and that cold air, looks like it is guaranteed to drift into Eastern Europe. If we see an easterly wind, there's quite a high chance it is cold, if not very cold. The ECMWF model has been showing a bit of a mixed picture. Some days it's been very cold, setting up a very cold pattern. Other days, not so much. You can see that high pressure up to our northeast starting to dominate. It is a battle between westerlies and easterlies. Out towards day 10, some runs show it's the cold but unsettled pattern. We've still got the block up to our north, but it's not strong enough to pull in very cold air from the east. Instead, we end up with cold but rainy conditions with low pressure coming off the Atlantic. Weather fronts would be pushing in, coming up against that cold block with very cold air remaining in the North Sea or just across the near continent. For us, cold rain. 4, 5, 6 degrees, maybe 7 with heavy rain, heavy bands of precipitation moving through a more miserable but colder pattern. The interesting development is the AI-driven forecast models. These use machine learning rather than traditional physics equations. They look at current starting conditions and historically what has happened. The data-driven models are showing something quite consistent. They've been very much on board with that easterly flow. The lows sink south, and unlike some physics models, they don't push eastwards. They slide down towards the Mediterranean. Towards the end of their runs, they show very cold easterly winds with low pressure, trying to penetrate across from the Atlantic but not having any success. We stay in that very cold air pretty much from next weekend for the whole of the following week, eventually ending up with an even colder easterly by the end of that. This doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, but when you see a distinct difference between the AI models and the physics-based models, it is worth paying attention. The data-driven models DON-T have the same assumptions built in that physics models do. Looking at the ensemble members, the GFS ensembles show average to above average over the coming days. For London, 7 to 8 to 9 degrees. a degree or two above average. By the middle to end of next week, we trend close to average and then eventually come next weekend below average. About a quarter to a fifth of ensemble members start to show an easterly at that point. More and more into the final week of January, there are a lot of much colder runs. The ensemble mean gets down close to -4 to -5. It's a fairly strong cold signal, but I wouldn't say it S locked in, as there still are milder runs. You can see there are very cold runs, those more beast from the east, like runs -10 and lower. The operational run is at that level, and there are others, but not an overwhelming number. Maybe 7 or 8, maybe 9 or 10 at most get down to that level at some point. That is a lot, but it's not an overwhelming number that we say it is definitely a favored scenario. It is definitely the most favored it has been all winter for that sort of depth of cold, but it is by no means guaranteed or a locked-in pattern at this stage. But definitely real interest, and it has trended that way this week. Sea level pressure is looking reasonably high. There are more wobbles from some runs, and those will be the runs that show more of a battle with the Atlantic. Temperatures generally dropping off, regardless of what ensemble member you look at. They all cooling down, generally speaking. So yes, it might not turn bitterly cold. It might not be wintry, but it definitely looks like it's going to be colder into next weekend and the following week. 3, 4, 5 degrees. Dew points indicate the wind direction. With an Atlantic airflow, it is generally going to be milder dew points. A continental airflow is more generally going to be cooler, regardless of whether it is a very cold air mass. It could be an air mass at 0 degrees, around average or above average, but still can have very cold dew points. This just indicates more of the wind direction, and you can see colder dew points longer term and some exceptionally cold dew points indicating dry continental air, potentially polar air coming in as well. Comparing to the ECMWF ensembles, they show a similar drop-off longer term, maybe not quite as cold with the general ensembles, but it has got quite a few very cold runs as well. Similar to the GFS, but slightly less bullish. More runs closer to average, still slightly below average, just not quite as cold. The operational run is kind of in the middle. The ECMWF runs at the moment are more on board with a battleground scenario, GFS more of a clear-cut easterly. The AI ensemble members are very much on board with that colder or bitterly cold pattern. The ensemble mean is probably even colder than the GFS by a degree or two, down towards -5, maybe -6. There are a lot more runs down towards the -8 to -10, and then a good cluster still -10 and below, including the operational AI model. The point of inflection for that very cold air to move in is in around a week's time. I suspect in the next 2 or 3 days, we'll have a much better idea on the timings of the potential easterly or cold easterly and the depth of cold as well. I think we'll have a bit of a breakthrough in the coming days where we either go one way or the other. Either we see that cold signal strengthen, all models come on board, and it's more 70 to 80% showing very cold than the 30 or 40% showing very cold right now. Or we go the other way, where the very cold becomes more of a minority option and we see more of a battleground scenario. It very much is at odds at the moment. I don't really want to call it definitively because these patterns have failed many times over the past few years, but there is a lot of interest. I think that final 5 days of January, maybe not as early as the 23rd or 24th, but 25th, 26th onwards into early February, I think there is a pretty strong chance it turns much colder. If it turns very cold down towards those ice day levels, then of course a high chance of seeing further wintry weather. With an easterly wind, that wintriness would be a lot more widespread and potentially a lot more severe for areas that didn't see much at all earlier on in January. Now let's talk about what you need to do. For those in Scotland, you're already dealing with the worst of the cold. You know how to handle this. Make sure you've got supplies in. Check on elderly neighbours. The roads will be properly gritted up there. That is standard. For those in northern England and Wales, you've seen this sort of weather before. It's not unprecedented, but do prepare. If we do see that easterly flow establish, it could bring significant snow, particularly to eastern coastal areas. That is a change from the usual pattern where western areas get the worst of it. The Midlands and East Anglia have had a rather quiet winter so far. Temperatures hovering around 6 or 7 degrees, grey skies, not much to write home about. If this pattern does develop as some models suggest, you could be in line for your first proper winter weather of the season. Don't leave it until the last minute. Stock up on essentials now whilst the shops are accessible. For the southeast and London, this sort of sustained cold would be unusual. Most people down there don to keep snow shovels to hand, and that is fair enough. If the very cold scenario does verify, consider working from home if possible. The roads want to be gritted as thoroughly as they would be up north. It's not criticism, it is just reality. You don't get this often enough to justify the same level of infrastructure. Cornwall and Devon have enjoyed rather pleasant weather for the past fortnight. Mild and dry. That is going to feel like a distant memory if we do turn properly cold. Make sure your heating system is working properly. Check your pipes, particularly if you've got external plumbing. For everyone, regardless of where you are, if you've got vulnerable relatives or neighbours, check in on them. This back and forth in temperatures we've been seeing has had people poorly for weeks. Sinus trouble, headaches. If we do settle into sustained cold, at least it'll be consistent. But that cold is hard on the elderly and those with respiratory conditions. If you are driving, keep a torch, blanket and some water in the boot. If your car gets stuck in snow, cardboard or an old carpet under the tyres increases traction. Works a treat. Many of you probably already know this old trick, but it's worth repeating for those who don't see snow regularly. Don't panic buy. That helps nobody. Just make sure you've got enough to last a few days if the roads do become difficult. Bread, milk, tinned goods, batteries for torches. Common sense, really. Keep an eye on the forecast updates over the next few days. This situation is evolving. We should have much more clarity by Monday or Tuesday about whether we are looking at a true beast from the east scenario or something less dramatic. The models will converge or diverge, and that LRL tell us a lot. For now, enjoy the relatively mild conditions whilst they last. Get those outdoor jobs done this weekend if you can. Come next week, it's looking increasingly likely you want to be outside for long. We'll be keeping you updated through the weekend and into next week as this pattern develops. The next 48 to 72 hours of model runs will be crucial in determining exactly